Hello, hello. This is Kim Ades from Frame of Mind Coaching, and you have just joined the Frame of Mind Coaching podcast. I can't tell you how happy I am to have this guest with me today. Her name is Ingrid Thompson. She's from Australia. It's like 6 a.m. there. I don't know how she does it and looks so good at this time of the day, but she's with me. I'm thrilled. She is a coach, but her focus is on helping people start businesses. The name of her company is called Healthy Numbers. So it's not only about starting a business, it's making sure that it's a profitable business. Ingrid, welcome.
Thank you, Kim, so much. And I am blessed to be one of those annoying early bird people that just wakes up in the morning and I'm sparky. So 6 a.m. it is actually pitch dark right here in Sydney. But
Wow.
Yeah, it's just a pleasure to be with you and the audience. Hello, everyone.
So I have a whole bunch of questions because I've started a whole bunch of businesses of my own. One might call me a serial entrepreneur. But let's just start with are some people more bent towards starting a business than others? Why is it a thing that some people can do easily and other people are just terrified to do?
Yeah, I think it is a thing. I think there are some people that just naturally have the chutzpah, the hustle, the genetic DNA to actually be able to do it, to hold it, to continue with it. It's interesting. I don't know if it's actually in your DNA as such, but my grandfather was a small store owner in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and he bought corner stores that were run down, built them up, and then sold them, and the family moved from store to store, and sometimes he'd have 2 or 3 at a time. And so he just could see the opportunity. He worked really hard. He and then built businesses that way. With the result, my mum had absolutely no desire whatsoever to have her own business because she knew just how hard it was to be in business. So it is hard work. And that is what actually is the inspiration for a lot of people, is that they're just determined to make something work. They have an idea. They want to see it through to fruition. And then there's people who truly are good employees. And, I think we must really honor the idea that people are good employees as well, because no company can exist without people working there. So, we need both parts of the equation. Yeah. But I do think there's definitely people that are more suited to running their own business than others.
So I still can't get over the fact that you use the word chutzpah and you're an Australian.
Is that okay? Does it mean the same thing?
Fantastic.
I'm a bit scared sometimes when I use random words.
Honestly, I loved you before, but now it went up about 100 notches. So sorry, I totally got distracted. Go back. So, I have been an entrepreneur for years and years and years, and I joke around, but it's very, very true. I say that I'm not employable. I'm simply not employable. I have a hard time working under other people's regimes, and, I just have a hard time. Is that a thing for entrepreneurs? Do you think that all entrepreneurs are wired that way? They're not rule followers. They're people who make things up as they go. What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think they are people who make things up as they go. And, we joke with some of our fellow business owners and entrepreneurs that, that's pretty much us, unemployable. The thing about that, though, is we still have to be able to work with other people. So while we kind of joke with that unemployable tag, we still have all the skills that are necessary to grow a team, to build a business, to have great relationships with customers and clients, and partnerships, not actual, developed partnerships with a business partner, but the partnerships that go with all the different businesses we work with. So, it's just something about being able to make your own decisions. And there are businesses where people can make good decisions inside a business, CEOs and heads of departments. And, there's a lot of people running kind of their own little business in a big business that have a lot of freedom, they find a spot where they can have that. So I think it's a characteristic of people, but there are some people that are just destined to be entrepreneurial and have their own business for whatever reason that is. Some it's money, some it's making a difference, some it's really bringing their purpose to life, some it's providing something to the world that doesn't exist.
So, I've studied leadership essentially my whole life. And I have not only studied leadership, but collected a whole bunch of data. And I'm just curious to know what you found. Data around what really truly differentiates, let's say, leaders from other people. Do you have any information about what differentiates a successful entrepreneur from one that starts a business and fails? Because we know, like, I don't even know what the stats are, but, you know, if you look at the restaurant industry, most of them fail, right?
Yeah.
Most people who start businesses struggle. So do you have any information? Like, what are the defining characteristics of successful entrepreneurs?
Well, I don't have data, to be honest. And with a business called Healthy Numbers, I should hang my head in shame, shouldn't I?
What have you observed?
But I tell you what I do have is I have a podcast where I've interviewed 140 something people. And one of my questions is, what are the 3 characteristics that you have that you believe make you successful? So this is self-analysis from people. Over and over it comes up with a love of learning. Over it comes up with resilience, tenacity, and that suite of behaviors, characteristics, skills that they have in that. A willingness to listen is another one. Being able to understand a need and follow it through. And you know, what might be a surprise to some people is that systems and processes and understanding how important that is actually does come up quite often as being something that people say is one of the things that makes them successful. Now, they may not be the person writing out the process because that's probably not their skill set, but they understand the necessity of being able to repeatedly do the same thing over and over so that there's a level of a surety from their clients and customers that the same level of standard is going to be able to be delivered every single time. And so that's where that comes from, systems and processes. You know, so that's, I think those are the key characteristics that come out again and again when I ask, you know, what is it that makes you successful?
That's very interesting. So what I have found is that resilience plays a paramount role. So what we've discovered is that people who are top performers in any field tend to have a higher degree of emotional resilience than others. And more specifically, you know, when we talk about what is resilience, it's this whole idea of bouncing back from adversity with speed and agility. But my findings are that not only are they able to bounce back, but they're able to somehow leverage that adversity, like turn it into an advantage of sorts. On the other side of the equation, when you talk about systems and creating replicatable outcomes, boy, you know, that's an interesting piece of information, because if you're building a product, you need to ensure, you know, quality or standards of production. And if you're delivering a service like I do, I have a team of coaches, I need to make sure that every single client is receiving the most extraordinary coaching. So we definitely have a system, a process, a methodology in place without which I wouldn't feel comfortable. So I agree with you on that. Do you think that some people, let's say, are afraid to start a business? What are the fears associated with that?
Oh, I love that question. This is actually probably one of my favorite topics about this, because I truly believe, Kim, that everybody somewhere inside, you know, it's squirreled away somewhere, there's this quiet dream to have their own business. You know, whether it's because they love making cakes and they want to have a cake business, or whether they love the idea of working with flowers all day long. So those are sort of small business ideas that I think a lot of people have. And you know, it probably will never come to fruition. And it's a hobby or it's an interest. And it's okay. Have a hobby, have an interest, and really, you know, take that beauty to the world. Sorry, what was your question?
What is it that makes some people afraid to start a business?
Oh, what makes them afraid? So there's a few things that makes them afraid. Is that they don't have anybody around them that's been in business. Now, that's not as true today as it was 20 years ago, but certainly, you know, having your own business was never really part of the program. You go to school, you go to college, you learn a craft, you go and do a trade, and you become that person. And if you've got nobody in your family, if you've never met anybody who had a business, that complete unknown. It's the fear of the unknown. They don't know what's expected. They don't know what they know. And there's the programming of, this is how my life will be. I will get married. I will have children. So then that's another set, is that you've got the financial commitments. And I remember listening to one of the guys who was on our Shark Tank some years before he became one of our Shark Tank people, he was talking to a group of young male, predominantly tech entrepreneurs, and he was saying, get into this before you get girlfriends, get wives, get husbands, get girlfriends, get wives, get children, get mortgages, because you can live on noodles and you can sleep 3 of you in a room and share the bean bags. And he said you don't have the financial commitment. So I think financial is a huge one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those stats that you talked about there, where people know that a lot of businesses fail. And truly the number one reason businesses fail is that there is no market need for their product. They don't do enough research to find out. So it's having that process to how to start a business. It's the unknown. They have financial commitments that they know that they can't run the risk of blowing, and they're too responsible to do that. And that they don't have anybody around them. Or even if they suggest that they would like to start a business, Uncle Jerry says, what? Why would you know about running a business? And that would, that squashes that desire very quickly.
I had that in my life. But go back for a minute. I want to talk a little bit about the financial aspect. So there's a theory. The theory says you need money to start a business. You need some degree of finances. You need money to make money. That is one line of thought.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Oh, I agree. It depends. Well, it depends. When I started my business, I've had 2 businesses. I have the current business, and truly this business is started with my gorgeous laptop, my internet connection, and my brain power. And then it starts to get more complicated, because you need a website and you've got to register yourself and you've got to get your insurance. So there are costs involved. So yes, you do need to have some money. If I was setting up a chiropractic clinic or an optometrist, there's a lot of money involved. Any of the health professions, there's a lot of money involved because of the equipment, because of the commitment to a lease, a 5-year lease with X dollars per month. You've got to have staff, because you probably can't do that by yourself. You mentioned restaurants. That's a hugely costly business to be in. And, you get somebody who says, oh, I love baking and cooking, or you go to a barbecue and someone's great at barbecue, or you go to somebody's house for dinner and people say, you should open a restaurant, and it's so different opening a restaurant to it is cooking your dinner at home or making nice lunches or whatever the particular food group is. But so having a restaurant is hugely expensive. Again, the commercial lease, you've got all the equipment that you need. The food costings are very tight for what you can charge for how much food costs. So yes, there is a need to have money depending on what it is you're doing. When it comes to tech again is like the service you and I provide, Kim. It's part of IP. People can do that as a side hustle and can be working on something, working on an idea, and that doesn't take a lot of money. If you're not a bricks and mortar business, your idea does not take a lot of money.
So I've always had a bit of a different attitude. Okay, so some things take money, no question. But the question is, can you start off with little money? And my feeling is that it requires more than money. It requires a great deal of creativity and resourcefulness.
Yeah.
Right? So I'll give you a perfect example. Years and years and years ago, I started a company called Upward Motion. And I remember at the time, wasn't really sure what I was doing, but the idea was to help young people acquire soft skills. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so how am I going to do that? And I got this brilliant idea to take on co-op students because they don't cost anything, and to get funding from the government to train these young people and use these young people to go and train other young people. I'm like, great, I'm going to have a co-op program. And at the time, my husband's like, we live in an apartment. Where are they going to come? They're going to come to your bedroom, right? Like, that's a problem. And he was 100% right. Like, where are they going to come? Like, I don't have an office space that's legitimate. And what high school teacher is going to let their high school student come to somebody's apartment? Like, that's not going to work, right?
Yeah.
And so what did I do? I went to a local mall and I noticed that there was an empty store. And so
Ah,
I contacted the leasing agency or whatever, and I said, "Here's who I am. It's an empty store. Can I use it for the next whatever semester every afternoon from 1 to 5?" And they said, "Sure." So
isn't that
suddenly I had a place for people to go.
fantastic?
But what I'm
Mm,
saying is that I think that people have like an idea, like a straight idea of how to run a business. And
mm,
sometimes being successful means your thinking can't be such a straight line. Like
yeah,
you got to get creative, you got to get resourceful, you got to look at what's available as though it's available to you, right? Not as though it's impossible because you can't afford it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And just taking that another step further is you had the government fund your ability to have those people
But
come and be trained.
but I had to go and, apply and
Absolutely.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. But you can do that with business as well. So if you've got an idea for something, one of the things that I always talk to people about is sort of defining their problem, the problem being the problem for the people, and then validating your solution. And one of the ways to validate your solution is will anybody pay you for it? So if you've got an idea, and that's how a lot of the businesses get started, is if you've got an idea, will people prepay you for something that you haven't quite created yet? So if you don't need to create a whole lot of things, whatever it is, like until you've actually got your pre-orders. And I think there's some beautiful examples of that. I think that's how Dropbox sort of started. I think Dropbox put it out there and said, here's an idea we've got. Does anybody think this is a good one? Sign up for our, pre-launch. And then as they started, I know there's a Dropbox that's free. But, that sort of model of taking your idea out and saying, I'm putting this together. Is there anybody interested? And if people pay you money. Now, I've just been working with, because of the changes in the business environment, one of the Pilates studios that I've been working with, they've got to make some changes to how they operate. And she wants everybody to have their own towel in the studio when they come back into the studio and it comes in. And so she thought, how could she do this? And she's found these beautiful towels. She's ordered 50 of them. They're $55 each. She said, I want everybody to pre-order their towel. She's got 50 different colors and patterns. Everybody will have their own towel. They went like that. Every single person. Now, she didn't have to outlay, $2,500 to buy the towels and then try to figure out how to sell them. She said to people, everyone's going to need a towel. I'm buying 50 of these. Who wants one? And they bought them. So I think that same idea of having other people paying for what your idea is an important way to run a business. Absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah. So as a coach who helps people run businesses, if I were to come to you and say, hey, I have this business idea, what's your process? How do you help people from start to execution?
Well, I have 7 steps actually. And I don't always work through them all in the order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I think the first question is, who are you to start a business? So what do you know about business? Are you reading articles? Are you listening to podcasts? Have you ever worked in the field that you're in? So if someone comes dreamy-eyed wanting to work in a florist, I say, when was the, oh no, I've never. Let's go get a job in a florist. Let's go volunteer. Go out to the markets, because at 4 o'clock in the morning when your arms are up to your elbows in ice cold water, are you going to be able to do that every single day? So, there's a lot of romance attached to a lot of businesses. So if they've got a solid background in their business and they want to start that business, I think the first is to really clearly define the idea. So what is the business that they have? Firstly, they're looking at themselves. Are they the person to start a business? And will it be a side hustle or will it go full on into a business? So how are they preparing themselves? How do we get that resilience? How do we get that tenacity? Are we always looking to learn new things? Do they understand finances? Have they got some money stashed away themselves that, they can buffer themselves? What I call my squirreling away money. And then what is the idea for the business? What is the idea and what is the problem? And who has that problem? So really working through a really smart way of thinking about what is that problem that the person has, where did the idea come from, how did you get the idea? And then really validating the problem, going out and talking to people and not offering your solution, but validating that there is a problem and that there is an audience for this problem. who have this problem and are looking for the solution. And what is their solution right now? Because if your idea isn't out there, then what are they doing to solve that problem? And then you take your solution out and validate that. So that's where you actually see, is anybody going to take the money out of their pocket and hand it over to you? Now, depending on what the business is, there's multiple ways of doing that. And that's what I would work through with people, the ideas of how you can validate that problem. So going out and talking to people and listening. And I often, I don't know about you, Kim, but I love detective shows and I love Scandi murder mysteries. And, you know, I've always loved detective stories. And I just love when they map it out on the wall and they have the pictures of the people and they ask the questions and they have the evidence. And thinking about starting a business is a bit like that. It's, you know, you've got to ask the questions, you've got to follow this lead, you've got to be like a bloodhound or like a sleuth. You know, it's that real investigative, that's the hat you have to put on, or the cape you want to put around you. Put your Sherlock hat on, Sherlock Holmes hat. So, you know, it's taking that curious, really investigative approach to, is there truly a problem? Is there somebody who wants this? And, you know, is my solution going to be the solution that people are going to choose?
So that's before you actually launch. This is like a testing process, kind of like
Absolutely.
doing the research associated with whether or not your business idea or the problem you're trying to solve is even viable.
It is, because viability will prove that there is an audience, and that sets you up for a much better chance of being successful. Because as I said earlier, I mean, people talk about cash flow being the reason that people go out of business. The reason cash flow is the reason is because there's no demand. So it's super, super important to validate the problem and validate that your solution is the answer.
So I want to talk a little bit about that. So let's say there's a guy who wants to start a coffee business from home.
Yeah.
And let's say he has this great idea to deliver coffee to homes, right? Mm-hmm. Like premium coffee, delicious, amazing coffee. What's the best way for him to validate that idea? Is that to ask his friends? Is that to try to pre-sell it? Like, what's the process? And I'm just taking an idea out of the blue.
Out of the blue. So selling coffees into people's homes, that's sort of like a home delivery for coffee mm-hmm. business. You'd have to go and talk to people. Would he talk to his friends? Look, his friends will help him, and his mum will buy some coffee, and his cousins will probably help him out. But it has to be further afield than that. It's the sort of thing that I might say to somebody, it's not quite the answer to that question, but we would get to maybe how it could work in homes, is I often say to people, go and try it out at the local markets. If you've got a local farmer's market or you've got a local craft market, get yourself a stand, a bit like you did with your pop-up shop. You know, get yourself a stand, go there for 4 or 5 weeks and sell what it is that you want to sell, whether it's cakes or coffees or cupcakes or, you know, some specialty bread, or you grow your own tomatoes mm-hmm. or whatever it is that you've got. So if it's that kind of crafty thing. Mm-hmm. The other thing that somebody might do, and, you know, I guess coffee does take a bit of an investment because he might need a van that he can drive around to deliver coffees, or, you know, how far an area would he be able to deliver coffees to? So, you know, sometimes when we look at a physical product like that, we draw a circle in the geography and say who lives in this area. Now, if he's in a very dense population where you've got apartment blocks with lots and lots of people, I mean, he could pretty much have the coffee at the bottom of the block and just supply one apartment block. I mean, I've heard of a whole business that was in the basement, and they pretty much ran their not in the basement, but in the base of a building, and they pretty much ran the whole business by Uber Eats, running up and down the elevator, right, delivering things to people who didn't want to come out of their homes. So, you know, that's an idea for a time where people don't want to come out of their homes. So early coffee deliveries is a great idea. It would have to look at the demographic. What is the population around? How hot does the coffee stay? How far it goes? So there would be all kinds of
What
research.
if it's just coffee beans?
Oh, coffee beans. I beg your pardon. I thought you meant coffee. Oh, he wants to deliver coffee beans. I thought you meant like a cappuccino in a cup. Yeah, same kind of thing. Is he would go maybe door to door and pre-sales. He, go to the area and say, "I'm a local guy." He'd have a story. He would.
Mm-hmm.
What would really appeal to a local community would be a story. I grew these beans in my back garden, or my uncle in some country grows these beans. I bring them in, I roast them, and I
Mm-hmm.
could the smell when we're roasting them. And you've got this old machine that we bought from 100 years ago. This is how they used to make coffee. And I mean, actually, I love coffee. I worked for a coffee bean roaster, and that smell and that beautiful big bowl that they have that they spin it round in. It's a beautiful, and you could tell quite a story, and it would be the story and the brand that would appeal to his local community that would
Mm-hmm.
perhaps would make people want to buy his coffee
But he
beans.
needs to go and ask.
He needs to get out of the house. He needs to get out of the house and go and talk to people, and he needs to listen. He needs to listen to what do they love about coffee? Where do they buy their beans now? What would it mean to them if they always had coffee just arriving on a Monday morning or a
Mm-hmm.
Sunday? They knew they
Mm-hmm.
had fresh coffee for the whole week. Yeah.
So you said something before that said cash flow struggles is usually a function of demand, right? Did I understand
Well,
you correctly?
it can be one of the people think it's running out of cash is the reason that a businesses fail in general. And that can come from no demand. It can
So is
come
it
from
no
mismanagement
demand,
as
or
well.
is it like just poor sales, poor marketing?
Well, it could be that as well, yeah. But you're not creating the demand.
Mm-hmm.
But often, what they actually, to be honest, Kim, the research I've seen is it's around 43% where there is actually no demand for the business, or they haven't been able to create a demand, that the product is not something that's in demand.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's around
So
that early 40s.
yeah, so I want to jump ahead into sales for a moment. And I know that you wrote a book. And actually, can you show everybody the book you wrote?
Yes, I can. Which side am I on? There we go. There we go. It's called So
So,
You Want to Start a Business. There we go.
okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Where do people find it?
Amazon, Kindle. It's on my website, but the best place to go is to wherever you buy your books online or any bookshops. It was published by Morgan James, which is a New York publisher, and it's available everywhere you buy your books.
And what is your website, just so people have it?
healthynumbers.com.au, because I'm in Australia.
Yeah. So I want to just jump a little bit forward into sales.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is struggling to increase their demand, so let's say they have a business and it's going okay, but not fantastic. Like, they're holding it together, but they're not really like seeing an increase in any way. What would be the recommendations that you would have for a business like that? What are the kind of the steps or the research or the whatever?
Actually, I'm going to wind back a little bit to one of the characteristics that make people successful, and truly being able to understand sales is a critical aspect, because for a lot of people who've never sold, and because I work with so many health professionals, they're really good at what they do, but selling is not something they've ever been taught. And in fact, a lot of people who work in allied health or describe themselves as empathetic types, or they just want to help people, find the whole selling thing very, very difficult. So that is something I didn't say back there. So if somebody hasn't got the sales that they want, so there's a couple of ways I would approach that. Is firstly, into the 20s, people are looking for an experience. It's not just a transaction. It's the whole experience. So what is the whole experience that a person gets with your business? Mm-hmm. And, your coffee bean guy might say, well, how do I make a whole experience out of that? Well, it's telling the story. It's how it arrives. It's the way it's packaged. It's what happens when somebody opens them. It's the whole experience of the sale. It's no longer just that one transaction. It's, what's the follow-up? What's the community that's based around Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media they choose to use for their product. So that's a critical, important point for people today. If sales aren't working, if they feel like their sales aren't what they were, is to really do the walk of the customer from Jan Carlson used to talk about it as being the moments of truth. It's like, what is that very first interaction people have, and then what's every single moment of truth that people have right up until they become a loyal and committed customer. And there's the book about raving fans. It's the same kind of idea, is how do you build a small team of people who just love you. And you'd rather have 100 truly loyal customers than 1,000 people who are dipping in and out. And then practically what I would say with my accounting hat on and my numbers analysis hat is I would look at sales reports. Like, get out your sales reports for the last 12 months. Who are your regular customers? If it's a client-based business, is everyone coming back as regularly as they ought to? Or have you got the front door wide open, grabbing all these new clients, but, the windows and the doors are open out the back and everybody's never coming back?
Right.
So, there's a really, if you've got a good system of how you take orders and how you work with people, whether it's selling a product, whether it's selling a service, have you got a good system so that you can go back to people and talk to them on a regular basis and encourage them?
So for you, if there was an existing business that wanted to increase sales, you would say, let's look at process first. What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you
what's
doing?
working, what's not working, and where is the low-hanging fruit, and where are the holes in your process? Which holes can you plug?
And what is the sales process? If somebody calls you and says, I want to X, what is that conversation that you have? How much information do you take about them at the time? What is their first experience with you? I worked some years ago, I worked with a beauty salon. They came to me, they were beside themselves because they'd just been told that they had 2 weeks to get out of their beauty salon. And she'd been in the area for a really long time. She had nobody's phone number. Almost nobody's phone number, and she had nobody's email addresses, because people used to just ring and say, oh, it's Kathy here, can I get my eyebrows done? And she'd put her in at 10 o'clock, Kathy, and we all knew who Kathy was. Now she doesn't have Kathy's phone number.
But that's not unusual. I see that all the time. I see that all the time. People actually, you make the call and they know you by name.
Yeah.
They don't know you by anything other than your first name. You don't exist other than that.
Yeah, and your eyebrows or whatever it is. Yeah. And in contrast to that, and this is a little bit off the track. Well, it's not really, but it's part of the experience. So we have one of our favorite restaurants. And in fact, as I was getting ready for our call this morning, I was thinking I need to go there very soon. And we went back after we hadn't been for quite some time. And Mark had made the booking, and the sommelier came over, and we knew him. And he said, oh, so lovely to see you back here, Mr. H. And he said, you know what, we've got a new Pinot on our wine list that I think you're going to love. And so we ordered it. Just took, if Adrian said we needed to have that Pinot, then we were definitely having it.
Right.
And when he went away, Mark said, isn't that amazing? He remembers us. And he remembers that we love Pinot. And I said to him, no, he doesn't.
He has a database.
His data. Mark said, will you stop that? He said, it feels good. And he said, I know. And so here's the thing that's really interesting about that, is that we know that he's got a database, but he used the database. He looked it up. He came over. He shook hands. He said, welcome back. He said, I have a Pinot, and this is why you'll like it. Because not only did he have a database, he had a database that had something that was important, and he knew because he'd had conversations with Mark in the past about Pinot. That's the experience. That is one of our absolute favorite restaurants. Do we go 2 or 3 times a year? Yeah. And that's an affordable, not everybody would go. It's a special occasion restaurant for a lot of people, but that's how they create that experience.
Right. Yeah. So which database do you recommend? Speaking of databases.
Oh, look, when I first started, I had an Excel spreadsheet. There's HubSpot now, there's Salesforce, there's all kinds, whatever works for you and your clients.
Quick question. Do you like Zoho? Is that a good one?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh,
sorry.
Boy. Oh,
Is that
boy.
the one for me? All right. Well,
I don't know. I wanted your assessment. Okay. Last question. What is the single most important piece of advice for someone wanting to start a business?
Just start. Honestly, start doing something. Like, define your idea, validate the problem, get out there and talk to people. Just get started. Get off the couch. Stop thinking about it. Don't overthink it, and get out and get going.
Okay. And one more time, where do people find you?
healthynumbers.com.au, or go to Amazon and read, oh, there we go, read the book, So You Want to Start a Business by Ingrid Thompson.
That's awesome. You gave me some things to think about, so thank you. I appreciate it. I love talking to you anyways. I don't know, there's something very awesome about you, your spirit, your energy, your glow. I don't know, the 6 a.m. thing. I don't know. But thank you for spending time with me. I appreciate it. I think you're great.
Thank
And
you so much,
I
Kim.
think people will love this episode. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, and good luck with whatever path you choose to take.